Breaking news this morning, Margaret Thatcher, Britain's Iron Lady, has died. Word of her death came less than an hour ago, and she is already being remembered around the world for transformative roles in Britain and on the world stage. But she also had a key role in Canadian history. As Don Newman reminded us a few minutes ago, she pushed the Constitution Act through the British House of Commons and was here at that time, 1983 and 1982, of course. It was signed into law, but joined Canada, traveled to Canada in 1983 and addressed Parliament at that time. She had been instrumental in pushing that through the British Parliament. And in fact, since we're on that topic, let us bring you in a special guest whom we've just reached by phone, former Prime Minister Jean Chretien. Monsieur Chretien, it's Heather Hiscox here. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Listen, I'm sorry to reach you always on these sad stories, but you're such an important link to history, and we're glad to have you here. On the passing just an hour ago, we learned, sir, of Margaret Thatcher. Could I get your initial thoughts?
Yes, you know, I had the occasion to work with her at the time of a repatriation of the Constitution when I was Minister of Justice, and I was responsible for the communication with the government of Great Britain and Parliament of Great Britain. And I met her a few times. I met her socially a couple of times after I became Prime Minister. She was a lady with a great personality and a very determined type of political person. You know, she was very important in the history of Great Britain, and she was very useful to us at the time of repatriation of the Constitution.
Can you talk about that? Why did she believe so strongly that Canada's Constitution, she sort of rushed it through or pushed it through, very much put her full might behind it?
No, she had to discuss that with Mr. Trudeau, and she recognized very rapidly that it was a normal thing to do for Canada to have our own constitution. The other countries of the Commonwealth had had their Constitution transferred to them in the 1930s or before. And the problem with Canada, we could not agree in Canada among ourselves to have an amending formula. So it's why we were not receiving our Constitution. So for her, she thought it was a completely normal thing to do.
I don't know if you remember this from last year, last August. There was some news reporting done on newly classified records that talked about a key meeting that she had with Prime Minister Trudeau at the time in June of 1980. And she was worried about Canada's plan to patriate the Constitution. She was worried because there was not a united approach, and she said she didn't want to be accused of interfering in any way. Do you remember some reluctance on her part?
Yes, but you talk about early in the process. She probably asked herself what will be the consequences. Of course, there was no unanimity in Canada. We had not been able to do that since the Westminster Treaty, when they gave us the right to do that in 1931. So she knew that it was 50 years that we were stuck with our Constitution being a British law. And she knew that it was controversial in Canada because you know, we could not agree. There was all sort of meetings and ministers involved in that, trying to find a solution. And, you know, it was normal for her to realize that there had been some problem. Of course, there had been some problems in Canada. We could not agree among ourselves for 50 years.
She traveled to Canada on numerous occasions, including 1983, following the signing of the Constitution, and she addressed Parliament at the time. Do you remember that? Was that as being significant at all? Her speech, she sort of talked about how, you know, there was the prediction that the 20th century would be the century of Canada, and she acknowledged that in her speech then.
Yeah, you know, it was a very, you know, great occasion for us. You know, we don't receive in Parliament that many leaders in a year, so she was a well-known, controversial politician, and you know, of course, the members of Parliament were very pleased to listen to her, and, you know, she had nice word to talk about Canada. So it was, now she could be a very pleasant person in private. Of course, she had very strong views on many things, and but as a person, she was, could be quite charming at occasion.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because her image, of course, for all of us who didn't get to know her closely, is this Iron Lady. What was the other side that you saw?
No, but, you know, for example, I have a great picture with her. I don't remember if it was, I think it was in Washington, and, you know, she was there, and she wanted to talk with me, or I wanted to talk with her, but I think she asked to talk with me, and she wanted to know what was going on in Canada, and she came to visit with me, and it was an extremely pleasant occasion. Of course, you know, you can be pleasant and be tough at the same time, and she was that person, I guess.
Monsieur Chretien, I thank you, as always, for giving us some time and for sharing your insight and your memories for us. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Jean Chretien, who was the Justice Minister at the time when Canada's Constitution was repatriated, and it was Margaret Thatcher, then the British Prime Minister, who made sure that happened through the British Parliament and then visited Canada after it had been signed into law in this country. Jean Chretien, one of many reactions we're going to get this morning in terms of initial thoughts after spreading the word of the death of Margaret Thatcher at the age of 87.